Today, we're going to review sharing and grouping division. We'll look at two story problems today, and we'll decide if this is a grouping or a sharing problem. But before we do that, let's take into consideration what it means to group or share. Okay, so I'm just going to warn you that before we start dividing whole numbers by fractions, I'm going to review some strategies for division that we've already covered, grouping and sharing, just to make sure you understand the difference. Because when you're multiplying fractions, it doesn't matter the order that you're multiplying because of the commutative property. However, this doesn't work when you're dividing. So you have to make sure that your dividend is in the right place and your divisor is in the right place, or the answer changes completely. So let's consider the problem 15 divided by 3. I have since I don't have tiles, I took some Connect 4 pieces. Look how creative I am here. Okay, so I have 15 Connect 4 chips here, right? What I want you to do is I want you to think about how I can divide these into 3 groups, 15 divided by 3. So go ahead, and I want you to get a loose leaf sheet of paper or your math journal, whatever you have to write in, and I want you to go ahead and I want you to draw these out, how you could do 15 divided by 3. Does your drawing look something similar to this? So in this problem, 15 divided by 3, I have divided or shared 15 items into 3 groups, right? So this we're going to call sharing. This is considered a sharing interpretation of division. And the reason why is because the total number of objects, 15, right, is shared out evenly among the certain number of groups, and in this case, 3. So I have 3 groups, and I've taken all 15, and I have shared them. Now, there's another way to interpret this same problem. It's called grouping. So let's take a look here and see how we can group these. So let's think about it for a moment. So if I have 15 of these chips, and I wanted to put them into groups of 3, that would make this a grouping strategy. Now let's see what that would look like and how it would change the way I explain my answer. Okay, notice here how I have same 15 pieces, but I've divided them into groups of 3. So I have 3 in each groups, right? And how many groups are there? Still 5. Okay, so you might be wondering, Mrs. Metalis, it's the same answer. 15 divided by 3 is 5. Why do I need to look at these pictures and drawings? Well, it's really important because sometimes these story problems or word problems are asking you for how many are being shared or how many are in each group or how many groups there are. So you have to know how to interpret it. So let's take one more closer look before we practice on our own. Get those notebooks ready. Okay, let's spend some time talking about the difference between sharing and grouping in both of these equations. And I want to stress the fact that it really makes a difference what the story problem is asking you or what it's telling you. So we're going to go through each step and we're going to talk about what the dividend means in each problem, what the divisor means in each problem, and what the answer is telling us in each problem. Okay, in both of these problems, we want to talk about what each of these numbers means. So in this case, the dividend is always going to be what we have. So that's how much we're starting with. So if the story problem is talking about cookies or talking about treats or whatever it is, it's what you have, right? Or what we're starting with, okay? And then in this case, the divisor, 3, is going to tell us 3 is going to be the number of groups, okay? And we can also think of this as how many people we're sharing with, okay? That's a good tip to use, right? So the number of groups or how many people you're sharing with is a way to think of it, okay? Now, the answer is going to be 5, right? And we already know that. But in this case, what does 5 tell us? 5 is telling us how many each group gets or how many each person gets if you're thinking of people, right? So you always want to make sure that you're thinking about the problem in the context that it's being asked. So in other words, how are you going to interpret the word problem? So I'm going to go ahead and just write here that 5 is the number in each group, and I'd like for you to be writing this down as well. Okay, in a grouping problem, similar information, right? So it's still the same equation, but this time 15, it's gonna, like always, be what you're starting with. This time, 5 is gonna be the number of groups, okay? So it's the number of groups instead of how many are in each group, right? So 5 is the number of groups, or the unknown, okay? And then 3 is going to be the number in each group, okay? Now, how is this going to affect your answer? Well, in story problems, you often have to answer a problem that relates to either how many are in each group, or how many does each person get, or how many people are there, right? So you really want to pay attention to what the story problem says. So here's the first problem we'll look at. Jeff made 12 cookies and divided them equally among his 4 cousins. How many cookies did each cousin get? Is this grouping or sharing? How will we know? Let's focus on the question. How many cookies did each cousin get? So let's write the equation down. For sure, the equation is 12 divided by 4. And there's a good chance, hopefully, you already know that 12 divided by 4 is 3. So let's go ahead and let's draw this out. Visual representations are really helpful for our understanding. There's our 12 cookies. Now, a reminder is that we know that Jeff had 12 cookies and he wanted to share them with his 4 cousins. So the cousins are going to represent the groups. So I drew my 4 stick figure cousins there, or Jeff's cousins. Any ideas yet? If this is a grouping or sharing problem? Well, we know 12 is the number of cookies, 4 is the number of groups, and 3 is how many each group gets. So if we go back to our organizer, hopefully you'll see that this is definitely a sharing problem because we know the number of groups. We just need to know how many each group gets. So this is a sharing problem. Let's take a look at another problem. Jeff made 12 cookies and packed them into sacks of 4. How many sacks of cookies was he able to make? So we still have 12 cookies. This time, though, the cookies are already in sacks of 4. We need to focus on how many sacks of cookies he was able to make. Going back, we have the same number of cookies. So we know our quotient, no matter what, is going to be 3. This time, though, 4 represents how many were in each sack. So I drew some Ziploc bags and I filled them with 4. So there were 4 in each sack. So is this grouping or sharing? So a final recap tells us here, sharing problems, we always are going to know the number of groups. So in the first problem, Jeff told us the number of cousins he has that he's going to share with, and that was the number of groups. In the second problem, we knew how many cookies Jeff packed in each sack. So that's what he was going to be giving out. So how many people could he share with would be the number of groups. So we knew the number in each group, we just didn't know the number of groups. So that makes the second problem a grouping problem. Okay, so just to review, if you are trying to find the size of the groups, that's sharing division. If you are trying to find the number of groups there are, that's grouping division. Now remember, in each of these questions, you'd have to answer in a complete sentence. So simply having the answer isn't always enough, okay? So remember the strategies that we use. And sometimes the drawing really helps. And remember, look at the key questions in each of these to determine how you'll answer the question. In the first set of activities you'll complete, you'll be identifying if sharing or grouping is the type of problem. For a challenge, go ahead and try to solve these problems. Then you'll work on writing your own equation, including the answers to the problems, and then you'll have to answer which one of these questions is being asked. Then you'll be able to choose your own and write it as a grouping and a sharing storing problem. Remember, go back and review this video if you need any help.